It is 11 p.m. You already ate dinner. You're not even hungry. You brush your teeth. You told yourself tonight would be different. And yet here you are, standing in front of the open refrigerator. Again, not because your body needs food, but because something deeper, something you cannot explain and cannot seem to control, is pulling you into that kitchen every single night, like clockwork. This is not a willpower problem. This is not a discipline problem. This is not even a hunger problem. This is a psychology problem. And today we're going to show you exactly what is happening inside your brain every night after dark, and why the solution has nothing to do with trying harder. Stay with us, because what you are about to learn will finally explain something that has been confusing and frustrating you for years. Your brain operates on a 24-hour biological clock. To understand why you cannot stop eating at night, we first need to understand something fundamental about how your brain is wired. Your brain runs on a precise internal timing system called the circadian rhythm. This biological clock controls almost every function in your body: your sleep cycles, your hormone levels, your body temperature, your metabolism, and critically, your hunger signals. Here is what most people never learn about this system. Your circadian rhythm is specifically designed to increase your appetite in the evening hours. This is not random. This is not a flaw. This was a deliberate evolutionary adaptation. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings lived in environments where food was unpredictable. Our ancestors learned that eating extra calories in the evening, when the day's physical activity was done and rest was coming, was a smart survival strategy. Loading up before sleep meant energy reserves for the next day of hunting and gathering. Your brain inherited that exact same programming. Every evening, as daylight fades, your circadian rhythm triggers a cascade of hormonal changes specifically designed to increase your desire for calorie-dense food. Your body is literally preparing you to eat more at night, just as it has done for every human being who ever lived. The problem is you're not a hunter-gatherer living in calorie scarcity. You're a modern person sitting on a couch surrounded by the most calorie-dense food in human history. And your ancient biological clock has absolutely no idea. The hormone shift that happens after dark. Now, let us get specific about exactly what is happening inside your body every evening that makes night eating feel so irresistible. When the sun goes down, your body begins producing a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. It is the chemical that creates the physical sensation of appetite. And research has consistently shown that ghrelin levels peak in the evening hours for most people, particularly between 8 p.m. and midnight. At the same time, your levels of leptin, the hormone that signals fullness and satisfaction, naturally decrease in the evening. Think about what this means. Every single night, your body is chemically increasing your hunger while simultaneously reducing your ability to feel full. You're being set up by your own hormones to eat more after dark, regardless of how much you consume during the day. But the hormonal story does not stop there. Your cortisol levels, remember cortisol is your stress hormone, follow a specific daily pattern. They are highest in the morning, giving you energy and alertness. And they gradually decrease throughout the day, reaching their lowest point in the evening. Here is the critical connection most people miss. Cortisol actually suppresses appetite during the day. When cortisol drops in the evening, that suppression lifts. Combined with rising ghrelin and falling leptin, the result is a perfect hormonal storm that makes evening hunger feel overwhelming and almost impossible to resist. You're not weak. You are hormonal. And there is a massive difference between those two things. The emotional eating trigger nobody talks about, but hormones are only part of the night eating story. There's a psychological dimension to evening eating that goes far deeper than biology alone. And it is rooted in something almost every person experiences, but very few people recognize for what it actually is. Emotional decompression. Think about what your typical day looks like. You wake up and immediately your mind fills with responsibilities. Work demands, family obligations, financial pressures, social expectations. Decision after decision after decision, draining your mental and emotional resources throughout the day. By evening, most people are carrying an enormous invisible weight of accumulated stress, frustration, boredom, loneliness, and emotional exhaustion. And your brain has learned something very specific about food. Eating, particularly eating sweet, salty, or fatty food, triggers an immediate release of dopamine in your brain's reward center. That dopamine hit creates a brief but powerful feeling of pleasure, relief, and comfort that temporarily quiets the emotional noise of the day. Your brain is not stupid. It remembers this. It learns this pattern. And over time, it begins to associate the evening hours, the couch, the television, the end of the day, with the expectation of that dopamine reward. This is why you can feel genuinely not hungry at dinner, and yet find yourself craving food 2 hours later while watching television. Your brain is not responding to physical hunger. It is responding to an emotional trigger that has been reinforced hundreds of times over months and years. The television becomes the cue. The couch becomes the cue. The silence of the house becomes the cue. And your brain automatically begins the dopamine-seeking behavior it has learned to associate with all of those evening signals. The restriction rebound effect here is another powerful psychological mechanism driving night eating that most diet advice completely ignores. It is called the restriction rebound effect. Most people who struggle with night eating are also people who try to control their food intake during the day. They skip breakfast. They eat light lunches. They avoid snacks. They restrict calories with discipline and determination throughout the daylight hours. And then night comes. Psychologist Janet Polivy spent decades researching what she called the what the hell effect. Her research showed a consistent and predictable pattern. The more rigidly a person restricts their eating during the day, the stronger their psychological drive to eat becomes in the evening. This happens for two reasons. First, your blood sugar has typically dropped significantly by evening after a day of restriction. Your brain detects this energy deficit and sends urgent hunger signals that feel completely different from ordinary appetite. This is biological desperation, not ordinary hunger. Second, and more powerfully, restriction creates a psychological pressure that builds throughout the day like a compressed spring. Every time you said no to food during the day, you added tension to that spring. By evening, the psychological pressure has built to a point where your conscious willpower is simply overwhelmed by the accumulated force of everything you denied yourself. The cruel irony is that the harder you try to control your eating during the day, the more powerful your night eating urges become. Your discipline is literally fueling your struggle. The sleep deprivation multiplier, there is one final factor that dramatically amplifies all of these night eating mechanisms. And it is one of the most overlooked connections in all of health psychology. Sleep deprivation. Research from the University of Chicago showed that people who sleep less than 7 hours per night show significantly elevated ghrelin levels and significantly reduced leptin levels compared to people who get adequate sleep. In other words, poor sleep makes you biologically hungrier and less able to feel full every single day. But the psychological effects of sleep deprivation go even further. Sleep-deprived brains show reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making center, and increased activity in the reward-seeking centers. This means that when you're sleep-deprived, your brain is simultaneously more driven to seek food rewards and less capable of making rational decisions about whether to eat them. Most night eaters are also poor sleepers, and most poor sleepers become worse night eaters. It is a vicious cycle that feeds itself night after night with no obvious entry point to break it. Until now, what actually breaks the night eating cycle? So now you understand the full psychological and biological picture of why night eating feels so powerful and so automatic. Here is what the science actually shows works to break this cycle. First, eat more during the day, not less. This sounds counterintuitive, but the research is clear. People who eat regular, satisfying meals throughout the day, including adequate protein and healthy fats, experience dramatically reduced evening hunger. You're not rewarding yourself by eating during the day. You are removing the biological and psychological pressure that explodes into night eating by evening. Second, identify your evening emotional triggers. For 1 week, write down what you are feeling every time you get the urge to eat at night. Not what you want to eat, what you're feeling. Stressed, bored, lonely, anxious, tired. Most people discover within 3 to 4 days that their night eating has almost nothing to do with food and everything to do with 2 or 3 specific emotional states they experience every evening. Once you identify the trigger, you can address the actual need instead of sedating it with food. Third, create a deliberate evening decompression routine. Your brain needs the dopamine reward and emotional relief that night eating has been providing. You cannot simply remove it without replacing it. A 20-minute walk, a warm shower, a specific playlist, a brief meditation. Any behavior that gives your brain a genuine sense of transition from the stress of the day to the calm of the evening will reduce the emotional pressure that drives night eating significantly. Fourth, protect your sleep aggressively. Given everything we now know about how sleep deprivation amplifies every biological and psychological driver of night eating, treating your sleep as a non-negotiable health priority is one of the most powerful night eating interventions available. Earlier bedtime, consistent wake time, no screens 30 minutes before sleep. These are not suggestions. They are neurological interventions. Closed night eating is not a character flaw. It is a perfect storm of evolutionary biology, hormonal chemistry, emotional psychology, and learned behavior all converging in the quiet hours after dark. The moment you stop blaming yourself and start understanding the real mechanisms driving your behavior, everything becomes possible. If this video explains something about yourself that no diet book ever did, share it with someone who needs to hear this tonight. Because somewhere, right now, someone is standing in front of their refrigerator at 11 p.m. feeling ashamed of something that was never their fault. Subscribe to Mind Body Truth for more videos that reveal the hidden psychology behind your health, your habits, and your body. Because the more you understand your own mind, the more power you have over your own life.